actually, because they give us this kind of artificial distance. I'm more interested in having a conversation with all of you, really. So I'd be really happy to share some of my thoughts and hear from all of you about what you think about some of the things we're going to be talking about today. Justice Ganguly and Madhvi Diwan, of course, are a very hard act to follow. Both of them have outlined so many of the issues that we really want to speak about. So I don't know what I'm going to really stress on. I'm not a lawyer, I'm a journalist. And one small correction, I'm not the founder of the Hoot. I'm a consulting editor there. Shevanti Nainan is the founder of the Hoot. We are both journalists, and we've been, part of the old school, lot of journalists, not part of the new funny money that you see in the media today. Unfortunately, there's a lot of it, of course, as Madhvi did speak of. And the kind of censorship that brings about is a very different story altogether. It would require another seminar altogether. I didn't really think that I would have 25 minutes to speak, but I realized that there is so much that one wants to really share. I'm here, of course, in Kolkata, the site of some of the worst kind of censorship that we are seeing lately. A few days ago, I think less than a month ago, there was this organization called Awaaz. It's a global campaign network, and it decided to have a protest on August 25th in Kolkata against rape. Wanted to put up some banners and public service advertisements all over the city, which was essentially to express the concerns of more than 1,700 people who signed a petition against the rape epidemic in West Bengal and the Chief Minister's handling of it. So anyway, Awaaz decided to approach a lot of these public service advertising agencies, the outdoor broadcasting ones, outdoor agencies, and 5 of them refused. They said they didn't have the nerve to host any of those public service advertisements. One of the local newspapers also refused to host these advertisements. Of course, you're all familiar with the arrest of the professor in Kolkata under Section 66A. He and his neighbor Ambikesh Mohapatra and Subrata Sengupta, they sent an email with a cartoon poking fun at the Chief Minister. Perhaps you will not know of another kind of censorship that happened with a small SMS service, a news service called Dodichi, which actually operates in the most interesting fashion, because there are these mass messaging and this one man with a mission to disseminate information for free. Again, the West Bengal government cracked down and disallowed service providers to allow this kind of SMS service that this man tried to do in Kolkata, and he had a huge subscriber base. There are other instances, of course. In June, there was a clash between members of the Trinamool Congress. It was a clash within the party, and 2 journalists, Astik Chatterjee from ABP Ananda and Varun Sengupta from 24 Ghanta, were attacked with iron rods and sticks. You should hear what happened to them. Astik said, "We started running for our life. A gang of hooligans chased us and managed to get hold of us. They beat us up with iron rods and sticks. One hit my head with an iron rod. I started bleeding profusely. I fell on the ground, but they didn't give up." Another group of miscreants caught this young man, Varun Sengupta, and dragged him into an abandoned house. They confined him to a room. They started beating me. One of them poured petrol on me. They were about to burn me alive when some locals stormed inside and managed to protect me. That's the city that we are living in right now. If these attacks are vicious, the others are just as chilling. Somebody actually manages to arrest someone just on the basis of an email that he has sent. Perhaps there are other instances I'm completely unaware of. But this is not really about Kolkata alone. Let's look at Mumbai, where I come from. Mumbai is supposed to be the financial capital of India, right? And here's where, just a few weeks ago, there was a protest against the socialite columnist Shobha Dey, because she tweeted about Mumbai and Maharashtra, and there's an old fight about whether Mumbai should be dealing from Maharashtra. I'm not going into that, but she just tweeted about it, so she got all this hate messages on her Twitter, and NCP people and the Shiv Sena decided to protest outside her house. Around perhaps the same time, there was a tiny restaurant called Aditi. It's not very well known, and the restaurant owner decided to print a message, a slogan in his in the bill that he gives to all his customers about the rising price rise. That's all. It was a simple, innocuous, funny, cheeky message. That's all he did. And for that, the NCP, which is one of the other members of the ruling party in Maharashtra, decided to storm his hotel, vandalize it, and do whatnot. You all know, of course, what happened to this young student, just like all of you, Shaheen Dada, who decided to post something on Facebook last year on the occasion of the death of Bal Thackeray. Also, Mumbai University, which decided to withdraw a book from its syllabus, Such a Long Journey by Rohit in History, just because there were some references to the Shiv Sena in it. The book has been in part of the syllabus for a long time, but just because one of the members of the Shiv Sena family, Aditya Thackeray, happened to be studying that course and realized that there was something about his family and his party about it, that he got together all his cohorts and decided to insist that the book was banned, was removed from this curriculum. Just 2 days ago, actually, there was a press council inquiry report where about 140 journalists were attacked all over Maharashtra, including a very serious acid attack on a journalist and his family in Parban. A couple of weeks ago, a journalist was killed in Muzaffarnagar. About 4 journalists have been killed in UP in the last, 1.5 months. I run something called the Free Speech Hub, which is a Google-funded project. We have been doing this from the hood for the last, from 2010. And believe me, we never imagined that we would be drowned with such instances on a day-to-day basis. We track freedom of expression across the board, all over India. And the kind of instances that we see and the range of attacks that we are recording on a day-to-day basis, and I'm sure there are many more that we are not able to record, but the ones that we do manage to record is astounding. The kind of attacks that we see. In this year itself, there are about 22 instances of threats in the cultural arena. And when I say the cultural arena, I mean, books being withdrawn, banned, films being, protests on films because of dialogues or titles or scenes which are supposed to be a problem. Just, theatre programs that are being stopped in Delhi. Ajoka was a theatre group from Pakistan which tried to host some very, very wonderful plays, and they were not given permission at the very last moment. Last week in Hyderabad, a film festival on Kashmir was hosted, but it was simply unable to go on because the venue was vandalized. In Kannada, in Karnataka, a Kannada writer called Yogesh Master was arrested for his book called Rundi. And of course, the Hindi feature film Grand Masti has been banned in Punjab and Haryana. I'm not asking you all to go and view Grand Masti, of course, but that's invariably what happens when there is a clampdown at some level or the other. There is a lot of interest. And there is a lot of criticism also that a number of the films that are being banned for various reasons could be prompted by some kind of marketing gimmicks. I'm not sure, but it can get really serious. as Madhuri spoke about Vishwarupa. There's another film called Thalavi, which is, I'm sorry if I'm not getting the right pronunciation, Thalaiva, which is still under scrutiny in Tamil Nadu. It's not being screened there. And a lot of cultural freedom of expression is entirely held to ransom. It's held to ransom by these vigilantes, these social offenders, these serial offenders or offense takers, as we can call them. These are self-appointed guardians of morality. They decide that Hindu values and customs have to be upheld. They are preservers of purity. They ban girls from possessing mobile phones. They keep a watchful eye on the friends that girls have. In Mangalore, they raid pubs. They pull out girls from buses if they are seen in the company of men who don't belong to the same religion. They beat them up. This is what we are seeing in terms of the kind of attacks on a day-to-day basis. But what gives these people the power to do all of this? What gives them the impunity? What is the role the state plays in providing this kind of sanction to these vigilantes, to these upholders of morality? Where do they get that kind of arrogance that they can go ahead and ransack, beat up, hit people, or just kill them? Where do they get that power? I think we have to really think about some of the institutions that provide this in some way. You're all going to be lawyers, and you're looking at the law, and you have to look at how the legal system works, and whether the legal system works in protecting freedom of expression or whether legal system lower down actually harms a lot of what we look at in freedom of expression. And the classic instance of M.F. Hussain, for instance, there were about I don't know how many cases, 914 cases all over the country. And the worst part was that these were lodged in small town cities, and the courts who were lower down invariably gave some relief to the people who petitioned these, against M.F. Hussain and his paintings. Now this seems to become a trend, and every time we find that when we go higher up in the judiciary, there's much more sagacity, there's much more wisdom, but it doesn't seem to permeate all the way down. And we really have to figure out why. Because it's at this lower level that that's the first stop where people actually go and seek some kind of relief and they don't get it. And we really have to figure out why this is happening. Perhaps also we need to look at the state and what kind of messages the state is giving, because it is one of the biggest violators of freedom of expression in the country today. There is no doubt about that. Look at the way the state uses sedition. The state is using sedition on all manner of dissent. We have around 7,000 people in Tamil Nadu who were charged with sedition just because they opposed a nuclear power plant in their neighborhood. That's absurd. We have another instance which is not so well recorded, but of course we know about Arundhati Roy and all the others, instances which are far more, and of course Asim Trivedi, which I will be speaking about him, and many other cases that have come to light. There was this one young man, a civil society activist in Tamil Nadu, in Salem district, called Piyush Sethia, who was distributing pamphlets on about 2 years ago, during just before the Republic Day, and he was distributing pamphlets against Operation Green Hunt. He was picked up for sedition. There's a scientist in Karnataka, and she's quite old, but she was picked up for sedition because she used to bring out a PUCL magazine, which is now defunct. She used to bring it out, but she now speaks up a lot about various civil liberty violations in to charge her with sedition. She wasn't arrested, fortunately, and I think now the case is over because the charges have been dropped. But the fact is that sedition becomes a huge weapon and a very psychological weapon because there is this fear, the sense of going against the state, which is a very huge fear. If you look at a number of cases which we have under various laws, under UAPA, under AFSPA, which are actually in conflict zones, and under the PSA, which is operational in Kashmir, and a number of media people, a number of journalists, a number of civil society activists, a number of other people who are routinely charged under this. And they have no recourse to the law because that is the way the law is designed. What happens to these people? And why must they be arrested? What is the huge reason that their dissent cannot be handled? I feel we really have to look at all of these things. We have to look at the amended IT Act. I think there's going to be a lot of discussion on it, so I'm not going to go on. It's saturated with such a lot of very, very vague, ill-defined terms, the liabilities for intermediaries, the powers that are given, inconvenience, danger, obstruction, insult, injury, Section 79, which talks about anything that's grossly harmful, harassing, blasphemous, which is again a very new concept in our law. It doesn't exist in exactly this manner. Anything that's defamatory, obscene, pornographic, pedophilic, it runs the whole gamut. But there is absolutely no scope of review. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when we started with the Free Speech Hub, and none of these rules were really framed. They were in the process of being framed. And there were a small bunch of us who spoke about the dangers that were inherent in these legislations. But we are seeing evidence of it, enough and more evidence of it today. And I really don't need to go into all those reasons. But if you look at the way in which these amendments were passed without any kind of discussion in Parliament, just after the November 26 attacks in 2008, the fact that there is absolutely no review and there is no scope for review also is really, really dangerous. We have these laws which are, we have these petitions, but even under Section 66A, for instance, I'll just speak a bit about it. I know we're going to be discussing it later, but after the Shagin Dada's arrest, the government came out with some guidelines. And some of those guidelines were about having an inspector, IG level police officer, senior police officer to actually investigate whether these charges applied. But even that is not foolproof, as we have seen in a number of cases again, that those are not foolproof as yet. So we obviously need to work harder. We need to work much harder on these. Another thing that Kapil Sibal, the Union Minister, told us was that the Section 66A was actually providing a lot of relief to women who were harassed online, and said that there were a number of instances of harassment of women online. But really we have to discuss whether a bad law and a law that is framed in notions of indecency or something that, like what you spoke of about the Indecent Representation of Women Act. I think the student who intervened earlier spoke about it. It's again framed in notions of modesty and indecency. We really have to discuss whether this is what we want as a law. We are being harassed, and if we wish to approach the law, do we wish to go under this particular provision? Do we need to look for other provisions which really talk about other values instead of modesty, which is so very difficult to define? We have to look at all of that. Yes, of course, we're looking at reasonable restrictions. I think a lot of discussion has gone on about the reasonable restrictions that exist in the Constitution. What we are seeing actually today is that, and I'm not a lawyer again, but I'm looking at the way in which a number of laws have come up which extend the notion of reasonable in these restrictions. I'll give you a simple example. We have a regulation for the program code of the cable network television rules, which has a long list of do's and don'ts. I'm not going to go into all of them. Rule 6.1m, if you read that, it says, anything that contains visuals or words which reflect a slandering, ironical and snobbish attitude in the portrayal of certain ethnic, linguistic and regional groups. What do they mean by this? I can think of a number of instances. And all of it would apply. Anything that is slandering, ironical or snobbish, that comes as part of the rules which cannot be allowed under the program, code for cable network television. There are a number of those kind of instances, and I really feel we need to go back and look at some of these codes and find out how many of them apply under those 6 or 8 reasonable restrictions that we are used to seeing in our constitution. We have to look at all the other codes that exist. I'm not even going into the fact that right now we have other forms of censorship. We have community radio which doesn't even allow news in our country. So at the policy level, we really have to work a lot more to get our government to trust us more. There are many other things that we will discuss in the course of the day. Just a few things that I want to highlight. We are going to have a special session on privacy and surveillance. The UN Human Rights Council is has concluded its session recently, just yesterday or the day before, on 13 principles on surveillance. It's very, very interesting. The UN Rapporteur for Freedom of Expression, Frank LaRue, has put together these 13 principles. They include legality, legitimate aim, necessity, adequacy, proportionality, and a whole lot of others. So we should be looking at how much of this works for our country. Because of course all of you will remember that we are one of the countries that keep coming up in terms of the largest number of takedown requests by our government, whether it's the Google Transparency Report or the very recent Facebook, which has come out with its global review, I think it's called global review. All of these keep showing up the fact that surveillance is very, very high in our country, and we all seem to be quite unconcerned about it. Present company excepted, of course. Hate speech is another area which we are really unable to deal with, and there is very little discussion really about hate speech, except for the fact that hate speech is bad, it shouldn't be allowed. But when we actually go into hate speech, we have to understand how much of hate speech we accept. Do we follow, principles that say that hate speech is allowed unless it results in direct harm, unless there is, it actually incites offense? How do we prove that? We have cases like the Bal Thackeray case on the Samna judgment, which actually doesn't, accept the fact that there was a direct link between the hate speech and the riots that followed in Mumbai. What do we do with hate propaganda? How do we deal with hate propaganda? That's another area which I think we really don't know much about. We don't discuss enough about. We kind of push it under the carpet. I don't want to go on beyond this. What I would really like to end with is to ask all of us really here how we promote a culture which protects freedom of expression. How do we promote a culture that is for tolerance, for sensitivity, for the vigorous protection of the right to dissent, even if it's unpalatable to us? How do we promote that? Do we have a right to offend? I think taking off from what Madhvi said earlier, do we have a right? Do we have a duty to offend? We really have to figure out also the most important thing, what are the alternatives to censorship? When we don't like something, when we find something that is offensive, when we find something that's objectionable, how do we react to it? And how do we promote a culture that allows for a non-censorious approach? How do we look at this? There are examples. There are a few examples I can share with you. In the earlier instance, when Ajoka Theatre Group was not allowed to perform in Delhi, they didn't perform at that venue, they performed at a smaller venue. In Mumbai, there was a protest against Nadira Babbar's play, But Nadira Babbar decided to go ahead with the play, and the protest went on outside. So the people who decided to protest the play were not allowed. The police actually intervened to see that the play went on, but the protest also continued. So there was a sort of, what do you call that, no man's land between the performance and the protest. But it worked. It actually worked because both sides had their point of view and they went ahead and expressed it. We have instances of the anti-Islamic video on YouTube, which a number of people wrote in. A number of people across the world wrote in and said, yes, it is offensive, but we are not going to see it. We are not going to bother about it. We are not going to react to it. And that's the best thing to do with it. Ignore it. It bothers you, ignore it. So there are ways in which we can look at fostering a climate for free speech. And we have to try and figure out exactly what those boundaries are, how we actually work out that. I think that is the challenge, and I hope we can discuss that. Thank you so much.